arrrrrgh. That's the nothing personal sound of the day for Thursday, 11/13/25. I wanted to have an eye patch ready to go, but our props department was shut down for the night. So just went with arrrrrgh. Today's episode is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Why am I doing my best pirate imitation? Because last night, MLB continued its week-long nail-biting announcement of postseason awards. Rookie of the Year, check. Build it up, Manager of the Year. Schneider, you got totally screwed. Check. Love you, Cleveland, but you know it's true. Last night, Cy Young. Check, check. And then tonight, MVP. Cy Young was a wipeout. The races weren't close. Paul Skenes, the ace of the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Paul Skenes, the boyfriend of Livy Dunn, the man with tree trunks that does nothing but not give up runs and not win games, was the unanimous choice to win his first Cy Young Award in his second season. Tarik Skubal won his second straight Cy Young as he is entering the final year of arbitration and is not yet signed to a long-term deal. Fascinating conversation. Let's start with Paul Skenes. Let's start with, what do you associate with Paul Skenes? Some people say Livy. Some people say Bob Nutting. Some people say can't win. Some people say no run support. Some people say, will he get injured? Some people say, how much money will it take to keep him? Some people say, how can they not keep him? Questions starting in year one. In year one. Outrageous. Reminder, Paul Skenes is signed to a contract with the Pirates. It is a 6-year deal. The terms of the deal are not set. The term of the deal is set. Does it mean that he won't be traded during the course of this 6-year deal? No, it doesn't. The same thing as any player signed to a deal without a no-trade clause. Every player who signs a long-term deal can get traded. How often do we talk about a player who is signed to a long-term deal in the first spring training? Will the team trade him? And in the chat, we're live on Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel. You all in Coca may be saying, but David, this is totally different. It's the Pirates. The Pirates have a low payroll. The Pirates don't pay money. The Pirates would never keep Paul Skenes. Are you sure? Are you sure that they wouldn't keep him for the first 6 years? Next year, this coming season, 2026, he's still not even eligible for arbitration. Paul Skenes will be making the league minimum, maybe a little shtup above it. For the Pittsburgh Pirates or any team to trade a Cy Young winner this early is out of the question. It is never going to happen. We're not talking about the Tigers with Skubal, who only has a year left. We're talking about Skenes, who has a year left also until arbitration. And then he has 3 years of arbitration. The conversation that the Pirates are having is simple as it relates to Skenes. Please stay healthy. That's it. They're not talking internally at all. They're not weighing trade offers. They're not listening to teams. I don't care what team it is. Your best young players, 4 of your top 5 prospects in the farm system. When you've got a performing pitcher, and I'm talking about a level of overperformance that you can't get once he gets deep into arbitration, once he becomes a free agent. You will never get the delta between what he's paid and what he's worth. It'll never be greater than it is right now. The whole point of being a low payroll team in a smaller market with less revenue is that you need a bunch of players who so far outperform their contracts. Paul Skenes is the number one example in baseball of a player outperforming his contract. Side note, Aaron Judge can win the MVP tonight, which I think he will. He can never outperform his free agent contract the amount that Paul Skenes is outperforming his pre-arbitration contract. When you are a front office and you've got that, you try to get more of that, not less. And you don't try to replace it with 4 others who could do it. You don't worry about that for years. You're not in your GM meetings right now and the Pirates are saying, hey, what if Skenes gets hurt? Maybe we got to move him right now and get another 4 or 5 guys. We can maybe get 6 guys because we're worried. It's not even coming up in conversation. What the Pirates are doing is saying, all right, how does the rotation look? Can we find another 1.5 starters to go with him and actually have a rotation with 2.5 outstanding starters? Can we make sure we have a little more offense? Can we do it on the periphery? What would be the way to try to get more wins while he's here right now? So I wanted to just eliminate that from the conversation immediately because I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of the day Paul Skenes wins his Cy Young that he has to answer questions about whether or not he said to a teammate that he wanted to be a Yankee. Some teammate of his came out and said, trust me, he wants to play for the Yankees. I've heard him say it multiple times. Do you know what goes on in the clubhouse? Well, if you haven't been in a clubhouse, let me share. There's a lot of time to sit around. There's TVs everywhere. You're watching other teams play. If I had $1 every time a player said, that would be a fun team to play with, I would be a very, very wealthy person. It is super common for someone who does a show on Metalark to say, oh, look at that show. That may be a fun show to be on. That doesn't mean that every player wants to be a Yankee or a Dodger or a Red Sox. If you did a poll of players in spring training and said, what team would you like to play for this year? Assuming the money's the same. If you offer them more money to go somewhere, they'd go anywhere. But assuming the money is the same, they'd all say the same thing. They'd talk to their families. If they like where they're living, they'll say, we'd like to be where we are. If they're apart from their families or want to be apart from their families, then they'll pick the city they want to go to where they've got a relationship. Some of them will say, I want to go to the city. Can you tell me who's going to win the World Series? I'd like to go to that team. It is entirely common. Why a teammate would come out and say this now or have it be picked up now is shameful. Forcing Ben Cherington, the GM, to have to react to it and quote, he said, I dismiss it, but I understand it. What exactly do you understand, Ben? How could that be your response to your best player wanting to be a Yankee? Why wouldn't you raise your hand and when you're asked a question at the Cosmo and you're the GM of the Pirates, why wouldn't you stand up and say, why would he want to be a Yankee? The Yankees and the Pirates have the same number of World Series since 2009 when Paul Skenes was a little one. I would assume that he's excited with our rotation, with the fact that we play in the greatest city in front of the greatest fans in the greatest stadium, and that he has an opportunity to do something that we haven't seen in Pittsburgh, unfortunately, since we are family in the 70s, and he is going to lead us there. Instead of I understand it. Not the way to go. Paul Skenes had to answer to this on the day he won the Cy Young for the Pirates. Paul Skenes' answer was so much better than his GM's. It's as though Paul Skenes has a representative who helped him, someone in social media who guided him. The way fans see us outside of Pittsburgh, we're not supposed to win. I want to be part of the 26 guys who change that. The goal is to win, and the goal is to win in Pittsburgh. Isn't that the quote you want from your Cy Young Award winner? It's the perfect response that Paul Skenes gave. Because there's one thing that players don't control when they are under 6 years of service and haven't earned the right to be free agents in a situation that is fully collectively bargained. The one thing they don't control is what uniform they wear. They have no say. Now, don't argue with me that there could be an undrafted free agent. There could be a released player. There could be a designated player. There could be a waived player. I'm talking about good players. They do not control where they play. Does it make sense to bemoan your home? Does it make sense in any way for him to sully Pittsburgh? Why would he? And he didn't. So the question follow-up to Ben Cherington is, during the GM meetings, well, what do we got? What are we going to do to win with Skenes? And of course, media and fans all think the same thing. Well, to win with Skenes, you have to have a higher payroll. Well, you can take a look at payrolls from last year. You can take a look at where the Pirates were. You can take a look at playoff teams. And I could argue pretty coherently and maybe persuasively to those of you willing to open your ears. The Pirates' payroll with Skenes, where he is, it ought to be enough to win now. Have they picked right? Have they signed right? Have they gotten the team together correctly? Obviously not. But the question that's always asked first, what's the payroll going to be? With Florida, we always knew that would be the first question of the offseason, and we always had an answer for it. I was always asked it in the end of season press conference. So what's the number going to be? I had the same answer, which is, I really don't have a number. We deal with the owner, and sometimes there's special money available, like when we signed Pudge in 2003 and win a World Series. Other times, there's not. Do you know the truth? Ben Cherington knows his payroll next year. It is basically a fiduciary injustice for the owner, Bob Nutting, to not go to his general manager, for every owner not to go to their general manager prior to the GM meetings, having budgeted next season, having met with the CFO, having met with the team president. You need to give your GM a payroll. You can't say to the GM, and this is a funny thing that owners sometimes say, and GMs parrot it, and it's ridiculous because it's how you lose. Hey, just bring me deals. We'll see what happens. We'll examine the deals one at a time. You can't put a team together that way. You have to know the payroll, so the people who know what they're doing, we can argue whether they do, but the people who are supposed to know what they're doing, put a team together based on a number given by ownership and president. Ben Cherington said, hey, we've got more flexibility than we've had in other off seasons I've been in Pittsburgh. What does that mean? I just don't know. Does that mean you have flexibility to sign more players? You have flexibility to have a higher payroll, but you don't know how much higher? Or is the flexibility go two ways, that you may sign guys that you then have to trade because the payroll is actually going to be lower than you thought? It doesn't make sense to tell your fans that we've got more flexibility, because what that reads is we're signing guys. Our payroll's going up. He doubled down. I feel confident we'll have a little more flexibility than we've had in other off seasons, and we're going to do everything we can to put that to use. Is he talking about payroll? Then say it. Our payroll is going up. I'm not going to disclose how much. I'm just telling you that with the natural raises and with the long-term deals we have that include raises, which are backloaded, we still have room to add to the roster. That's the way I would put it. Not flexibility. We have room to add. Then we can debate who we add, how we add. All of this strange talk that comes during the GM meetings, and we're going to get to the strangest of all later in the show. But all the strange talk is because they're in front of the media now every day during these GM meetings, and they don't know what to do because they don't want to tell you the truth. They feel like it's a competitive disadvantage that if you tell the world, yes, our payroll can be 150 million, then agents and other GMs will take advantage of that knowledge. Spoiler alert, every team carries around every other team's payroll. Every agent carries around every team's payroll, and they've got different cases, meaning what if the Yankees add $50 million to a team they already have, with the free agents gone, with some of the free agents coming back, with the arbitration eligible players getting paid? We calculate every team's payroll. We're forced to do it as an exercise. MLB has the numbers already. One of the rules is that we have to submit our projections to Major League Baseball prior to the start of every season, revenue and expense. You can go ahead and ask Rob Manfred all you want what Pittsburgh Pirates' budgeted payroll is. He's never going to tell you. But every team's got that budgeted payroll. The next Cy Young Award winner is a Scott Boras client. 2 in a row for Tarik Skubal. Everyone saw it coming. Crushed it, got 26 of 30 first place votes, I believe. That doesn't sound right. There's 30. I can't remember what the votes were, but Cease got 4 first place, I think, for Boston. But it doesn't matter. Skubal, really the overwhelming Cy Young winner. 2 in a row. Doesn't happen often. Let's talk about what that means for Detroit, because, again, that became the lead story. What do the Tigers do now that he's won his second Cy Young? Do you think that Chris Ilitch, the owner of the Tigers, was not ready for the fact that Skubal was going to win the Cy Young? Skubal was the favorite to win the Cy Young ever since the All-Star game, frankly, when Skenes and Skubal faced each other, becoming the first set of All-Star starters to bring it home with Cy Young since 2001, when Randy Johnson and Roger Clemens did it. The Tigers, like the Pirates, were very well aware that Skubal was entering his final year of arbitration. They've been well aware for the last 2 years what his arbitration number is likely to be this year. Spoiler alert, it's going to be a big number. Like it's going to start with a 2, and it won't be the low 20s. The Detroit Tigers have been figuring out their payroll for 2026 not since last October, like last month after they were eliminated. They've been working on future payrolls for years. What would change their mind? When we had a 5+ player, position player or pitcher, we had made a decision about what we were going to do with that player before the offseason even started. We didn't want to be tempted, because believe me, teams are going to tempt the Tigers with trades for Skubal. They're going to offer multiplayer packages ready for the big league pitchers, plus young, ready position players. You're talking about the second most valuable asset in baseball, Skenes being the first. The reason Skubal's second is he only has a year until free agency. There are teams who will approach Detroit and say, give us a window to negotiate. But Skubal's agent is Scott Boras. There is no scenario that Skubal will agree to a long-term deal with Detroit right now, no matter what Scott Boras said, and we'll get to what he said about Skubal in a moment. The reality is that you have to know what your plan is while you remain flexible, given if there is some sort of thing in the market that happens that you didn't expect. That didn't happen very often in my career, because if you've got an asset like Skubal, you are writing down every single trade you would do with every single team. You've got an entire division of pro scouts whose job is to know every single organization. You have met with your baseball people. You have written down 29 teams, 29 trade packages. When someone calls on Skubal, you respond with the package you would do. It may not be 29 of them. You may have gone through the best packages possible on every team and decided there are 7 trades that we would do as is. When you're called as a GM, when you've got a 5+ asset, you take that call. You answer with the exact trade you would make. If the Tigers get an overpay that would bring you into night sweats, they'll move Skubal, regardless of what Boras says or the fans say, because it's the right baseball deal to make. I'm extremely happy to tell you that Skenes and Skubal are starters you should be watching. There are a bunch of must-see pitchers in Major League Baseball. It's an exciting time. There's a labor part of all of this as well, because 2027 could be a work stoppage, which would be Skubal's first year as a free agent. And the thing about work stoppages is that players get a year older if you miss a year. And when you're a pitcher, you don't want to miss a year of your prime. It impacts your earnings potential. Does it mean that Skubal would sign a long-term deal today that he wouldn't normally? My answer to all of you is no. Do not think that the labor situation that exists with the agreement running out is going to cause these players, especially Boras players, to do anything out of character, to take any sort of discount because of their concern about a work stoppage. The union won't allow it. The other note about labor is that many years ago, there's a player that some of you shouldn't know, but only like 18% of you. There was a pitcher named Tim Lincecum. Tim Lincecum is a world champion. Tim Lincecum played for the San Francisco Giants. Tim Lincecum won a Cy Young Award in his second year, just like Paul Skenes. Tim Lincecum won the Cy Young Award the next year, too. Tim Lincecum won a World Series. He did all of this before arbitration. Tim Lincecum was one of the greatest examples, the greatest I'd ever seen of a young pitcher performing. Do you know that in the last labor deal, when you won a Cy Young, it was just something you could use in arbitration when you got to arbitration? But there's something called the pre-arbitration pool that exists in Major League Baseball right now. There is a bunch of money that goes to young players who are not yet available to make money in arbitration, and it gives them money from this pot for any sort of special accomplishment. Paul Skenes is getting a $2.5 million bonus for winning the Cy Young. That's more money than he's made in salary year 1 plus year 2 plus year 3. That is not nothing. For those of you in Pittsburgh who are concerned that all of a sudden Paul Skenes could be making, $5 million this year and the impact that will have on the Pirates' payroll, I want to make sure you've got your facts straight. The bonus he's getting for Cy Young, $2.5 million. He may get another $1 million if he finishes first team all MLB, which he should. He may get another $1 million if he finishes in the top 5 in MVP, which he may. We'll know tonight. That $4.5 million in bonuses does not come from the Pirates. That money comes from a fund that the league has, money that the league and the union have agreed to secrete away that would be used as part of this pre-arbitration bonus pool. that gets distributed to all sorts of players, not just Skenes, but to all sorts of pre-arbitration players who have done certain things, had certain accomplishments. But it does not count toward the player payroll. Just want to clarify that. Now we get to go to my favorite part of the GM meetings. Scott Boras. I'm going to sit up straight because I wish I had a different background here, Coca. Scott Boras at the GM meetings and Scott Boras at the winter meetings. You've heard me say it. If you're new to the show, then this is new to you. Scott Boras is an agent in Major League Baseball. Scott Boras believes he's the most powerful agent in Major League Baseball. Scott Boras believes that he controls the union. Scott Boras believes that he controls what owners do. Scott Boras doesn't talk to GMs. He doesn't talk to team presidents. He only wants to deal with people he believes that he can take advantage of so that his players will get the types of deals that other players won't get with other agents. So Scott Boras can then poach other players from other agents because he's done such a great job. Scott Boras is the example of Barry Manilow in Vegas. I love him. I want to see him, but my God, am I sad with what I'm hearing and seeing. There was a time when Scott Boras was feared and revered. That time is past. Scott Boras comes to the GM meetings each year, sets up his own backdrop, and members of the media bless their souls because they want to get great quotes. They give him a platform for him to spew nonsense only about his free agents. How nobody on the Intergoogle has strung together all of the Scott Boras media availabilities from the GM meetings and the winter meetings over the years to keep track of all of the crap. I'm going to show you some video of things because they're players that interest you, including Skubal. But first, I want to tell you, as an executive, every year of my career, at the GM meetings and the winter meetings, Scott Boras did it. And do you know what we did as a front office? We laughed. We ignored. It had zero impact. The fact that he wants to tell you about his free agents to try to pressure teams into doing deals they don't want to do, we laugh. 1 year, the laugh was on Scott. Because 1 year, our owner got snookered by Boras into signing Wei-Yin Chen. 1 year, it worked with one player. Much to our chagrin, though, Wei-Yin Chen is a great guy other than his choice of agents. 1 year. The majority of teams, like 30 of them, would watch this video. Just, do you think Steve Cohn watches this video and says, oh my God, now I understand? Watch this video on Pete Alonso.
Pete, at this point in his career, he's about winning, no doubt. Had that question a lot. There's no doubt that Pete's pursuers are primed to pay the power piper. You know, Pete picked the perfect period to play preeminently at a primary position. A playoff parched plethora will pounce to participate in the polar plunge.
Can't stand the thought of media laughing at those alliterations. I can't stand the thought that Pete Alonso looks at that like some cult leader saying, wow, this guy's advocating for me. This guy's making a difference for me. You think Steve Cohn pays attention to that? He says, oh, that's definitely $30 million a year for 5 years. We're going to give him that 150 because we are playoff parched. And we know that we have to take the polar plunge with the polar bear. Who knows whatever the hell he said. Do you not cringe when you see that and hear that? Do you think that's effective advocacy for a client? I dealt with hundreds of agents. Their effectiveness is based on information. It's based on understanding the market. It's based on understanding the player. It's not based on the idiocy of alliteration. in front of a public that is laughing at him, not with him. Pete Alonso's chances of being on the Mets have not improved because Scott Boras took the podium to tell you what an important player he would be in the playoffs. Pete Alonso's decision to be a Met will be based on what Stephen Cohen decides to tell David Stearns he is willing to go to in order to retain Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is the same player who Scott Boras talked about last year and couldn't get a long-term deal for. Pete Alonso is the same player that he was then, now, except he's a year older. What is it about this year that would make the Mets do something that they weren't willing to do last year? Did they learn something? Yeah, he got a year older. Do you think other teams looked at Pete Alonso and said, wow, we really are parched for power at this primary position, and it didn't occur to us that we'd have a chance to bring Pete Alonso into the fold? Now I'm aware of it, and we'll hit the bid. Didn't know it last year, but we got it done this year. It's preposterous. But he went through his entire list of players. Listen to what he said about Tarik Skubal, who's not even going to be a free agent for another year.
The fans in Detroit want the Tigers to build a Tarik Barrack. You know, they, Little Caesars running around town saying "Sigh, sigh." So it's a kind of thing where he's built a base. Obviously, everywhere they go, they know it's Skubal Day. They understand that organization is substantially different if he's not there. And when you're in these situations and you go through it, all we know is that we hear mostly from the fans, and the player hears from the fans, and it's kind of like it should be Scooby done, right? And if not, I think the fans would certainly think it's a Detroit doink if they don't.
Did you hear what he said about we hear mostly from the fans and the players? Do you get what I mean by that? That the people who matter, the owners and the presidents and the GMs, they don't actually pay attention. Fans and players, that's who you're going to use as a way to show us that it's going to be a Detroit doink if they don't sign him long-term. Chris Ilitch, the Ilitch family, their Little Caesar family, Little Caesar money, pizza, pizza. So instead he said, Cy, Cy, as in his 2 Cy Young Awards. Oh, I didn't know how to value the player until I thought of it that way as a Little Caesar pizza man. He also has Alex Bregman. I can't show you the video of it because it's so absurd. I'm just going to tell you. He said, give the owners credit. He's talking about John Henry of the Red Sox. They went out to spend some $1 to bring in a Bregman blend. Do you get it? This is coffee. That led them to the playoffs. I'm sure the Boston fans don't want this to be just a cup of coffee, and no one wants a Brexit. Get it? No one wants him to leave because no one wants a Brexit like England. Oh, that's true. Bregman is not English, but let's not quibble over that. And yes, one of the sponsors of the Red Sox, Dunkin' Donuts. So I get the whole donuts. The whole Starbucks thing is a little strange because it's not the Mariners. Oh, by the way, Bregman opted out because he had a short-term deal because he was your client last year, Scott, who you couldn't get a long-term deal for that you promised. And now you're backpedaling the same guy again. He did the same thing with Cody Bellinger, peddling him again because he couldn't get a long-term deal with him. Now comparing him to Iceman and Top Gun in order to prove that he has what it takes to be with Aaron Judge and to be the Yankees lineup stalwart. He is peddling the same crap with older players. I would ask all front offices, because I know you're listening. I know that you're feeling the pressure to bring these players back because of the success that you think they had and your team had. But Yankees, Red Sox, Mets, Tigers, do you want to have the same year you had next year, except pay more money for it? You're not the Blue Jays. You're not the Dodgers. You didn't win the pennant with the players you had. Now, would you bring in other free agents who are not Boras players to try to change it up, get a different combination? I'm going to give you a wait to see here, Coca. Wait to see when we tell you something's going to happen. If it does, fine. If not, fine. But it's at davidsamsonpodcast.com, and I'm giving it to you, and it's official. Scott Boras will be forced again to take short-term deals with multiple of his clients. All of the vitriolic spew that comes from his vocal cords will end in the same place because owners and presidents are done with him. They don't fall for it anymore. And Alonso and Bregman and Bellinger, they are not 5 to 7 year players. None of them. Multiple of the players will be back to the short-term deals with opt-outs. You wait to see. Okay, today's Thursday, Coca. Last show of the week. Again, we're not here Friday. I've got another couple weeks of this 3-day-a-week. I hope to come back to 4 days and eventually 5 days at some point. I just don't know when it's going to happen. I love the Thursday show because we get to review a movie, but we also do a Wednesday show, which is So You Want to Talk to Samson. That was yesterday. I want to remind everybody, your voicemails matter. Call 631-377-4869. And we have new listeners because someone called and said, oh, I didn't realize you had this. I just learned. And we love the fact, if you've been watching Pablo Torre Finds Out, and we dropped a show just last night, a sporting class with John Skipper, myself, and Pablo talking about Disney and YouTube. I encourage you to go listen to it after we're done with Coca's Hour in another hour and change. And I would tell you that it's a great show. But you can have Pablo Torre Finds Out. You can have Nothing Personal with David Samson. And Wednesdays, you can have yourself. So 631-377-4869. As you know, we review a movie every day that we have a show. Coca, what do we got? When I say Roller Girl, is that it? Do I need to say anything else? One of my dear friends from my days at a while ago, days at CBS actually, sent me a video which was asking people, hey, what year did you graduate high school? And then what is Jenny's number? The inside joke of that is that when I'm asked to do a mic check, whether I'm on CNN or Fox or whatever show I'm on, when I'm asked to do a mic check, I always say the same thing. They say, can you count to 10? And I say 867-5309. It doesn't much matter what the numbers are. They're just testing your gain. They're testing your mic. And some people laugh at that. Younger people have no idea what I'm saying. That's a great song. Tommy Two-Tone. Phone number 867-5309. I thought everybody would know that. Turns out, if you're like high school in the 2000s, you have no idea. So when I say Roller Girl, like to Coca, and I'm going to ask him in the second hour unless he'll tell me in my ear right now. When I say Roller Girl, do you know what that means? Coca? He doesn't. Wow. Heather Graham plays Roller Girl in Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is one of the great performances by Philip Seymour Hoffman that you'll ever see. Mark Wahlberg uses a prosthetic in a way that would make you say, wow, is that a prosthetic? Burt Reynolds. Yes, that Burt Reynolds is in this movie. The maker of this movie, let me try to put it in terms of today. One battle after another. Same guy. This movie is even better. Boogie Nights, which I didn't rewatch this week, don't need to. I can give it to you scene by scene. The guy from Talent, John C. Reilly. It's a movie about the porn industry and about those times. Boy, should you watch it. It's number 60 on my list. We only have a few Thursdays left to do this. Next week, I get to review Midnight Run, which is number 58 on my top 100 with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro. I quote Midnight Run on this show just as much as any other movie. I'm excited to watch that. Thank you. I'm also going to watch a movie this weekend. There's a new Channing Tatum movie out, and it's called, with Kirsten Dunst, who I love from Elizabethtown. It's called Roof Man, a true story apparently about a guy who lives on a roof or something. It's a new movie available for streaming. It's called Roof Man, and I'm going to watch it. Nothing personal pick of the day. Nothing personal pick of the day is presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We've got Thursday night football tonight as week 11 in the NFL starts with the Patriots playing the New York Jets. I'm looking at this game and telling you I'm a little tired. It's been a long week. I think the best play of this game is the first quarter, where the Patriots are giving 2.5 points to the Jets, according to our friends at DraftKings. We are taking the Patriots in the first quarter minus 2.5 over the Jets. On Sunday, our second nothing personal pick of the day presented by DraftKings, we are looking at the Packers and the Giants. We are looking at Winston, who is going to be starting for the Giants, not the rookie with the concussion, not the veteran with the famous significant other wife. We're talking about Winston. Winston? Yeah, the guy signed to the 1-year, $10.5 million deal that is all of a sudden starting when Russell Wilson was the one starting before he lost his job, and now he can't even get his job back when the guy he lost his job to is hurt, that they decide the QB1 is going to be Winston. The Giants, who just fired their coach, and you're thinking they're going to win one for the Gipper? Well, guess what? The team on the other side, the Green Bay Packers, also needs to win one for the Gipper, and they're a better team. When you've got two Gippers going, go with the better team. I read that in a fortune cookie. Packers -7 over the Giants at the Wrecking Ball. Those are your nothing personal picks of the day presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We had a setback last night, Coca. The Knicks laid an absolute dozen eggs at the world's most famous arena. They got absolutely spanked by the Magic. It's not that the Knicks should have been giving 3.5. It's the Knicks should have been getting about 18. An absolute destruction for a team that had been underperforming all season and chose last night to beat the second best team in the East. So we're down to 140 and 143. We need to sweep this weekend to put ourselves in a position to be able to climb back to 500 with Monday night's game. We'll see. Dear Eagles fans, you guys have had a great run. Couple Super Bowls, couple near misses, couple great times. You agree with that? We talked about the insanity of the Monday night game and Coach Sirianni, that fourth down, ridiculous Hail Mary to A.J. Brown. We've done stories about A.J. Brown. I had to wait to see that I got wrong because I told you that A.J. Brown will not be on the Eagles this season. And he is. One thing I learned of many, people generally don't change. If you thought that A.J. Brown, after winning the Super Bowl last year, would come back into camp this year and be Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, be the guy, be the teammate, what were you thinking exactly? A.J. Brown is divisive within the Eagles. He is a distraction within the Eagles, to the point where the coach and the players have to keep talking about him. That is page 1 of the distraction playbook. Side note, Coca. When we have a pitcher go out and give up 8 runs in the first and have a temper tantrum and not meet the media after the game, do you know what happens? Because the media has to meet with somebody. That means one of that pitcher's teammates has to take the questions that he should have taken. Because the media's got to ask the questions of somebody. What did you see was wrong with this pitcher? Did he not have his stuff? Was the approach wrong? Was he tipping pitches? And it's being asked of a different player because the person who should be answering the questions has gone AWOL. That is what we call inside our clubhouse as a major distraction, something we do not encourage. When Nick Sirianni has to talk about A.J. Brown, when Jalen Hurts has to talk about A.J. Brown, every single week, think about how sick of it you'd be. Jalen Hurts actually just said, and I'm quoting, "I know you got to ask those questions, and I got a lot of respect for that." That is a great start, Jalen. It's nice of you to give respect to the media. "My focus always goes back to what the group is doing and what the collective is. And AJ plays a pivotal role in what we've been and what we've done, and we have to continue to grow with that every day." Okay. That's what we're asking Jalen Hurts to say. Is the media happy with that quote? Does that make you feel better about what's going on with AJ? Why don't we see what Nick Sirianni has to say? Is AJ a distraction? Like, what's the story here? "No, I don't think so," Sirianni said yesterday. "You can only go from your interactions with everybody and the way they go about their work on a daily basis that you guys aren't able to see. But no, business as usual." Business as usual means that A.J. Brown is a distraction. Business as usual means that A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts do not see eye to eye. If they did, why would A.J. Brown get 2 or 3 targets during the course of a game if he's your receiver 1? Why would you force your coach to say, "Listen, of course Jalen wants to get the ball to A.J. more, but if A.J.'s covered, then we've got to go a different direction"? Under that theory, no wide receiver 1s would ever get the ball. Jerry Rice would not have any receptions. Gronk, nothing. You don't think that Jalen Hurts on that 4th down play Monday night when he heaved it in A.J. Brown's direction for that incompletion, you don't think that was in any way part of this problem? The reason the Philadelphia Eagles have this issue right now is that A.J. Brown is still on the team. But if they win a Super Bowl, then everything's fine. But the minute they don't, this A.J. Brown situation is going to boil over and finally will result in my wait to see being right because he'll be gone. Speaking about him every single day. Outrageous. All your favorite NBA players are back. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is the place to bet on NBA stars this season. New customers bet just $5 and get 3 months of NBA League Pass. Plus, score $300 if your bet wins, paid in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code Samson. That's code SAMSON. Bet $5 and get 3 months of League Pass, plus get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. All of this, of course, is in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. It's David Samson, hour 2 on Thursday, November 13th, 2025. On Thursdays, because we have no show tomorrow, Coca used to do Fridays. Now we get him for second hour Thursdays. So his weekend, do you feel like your weekend starts early, Coca? Have you gotten totally screwed up with what day is what? Because in a way I have these last 2 months. But let's welcome Matthew Coca to the show, our esteemed producer. For those of you new to the show, you may not know that he exists, but he does. Coke is in my ear all show long. He's a real person, and now he has some thoughts, except he's not showing up. I don't know what he's doing. There he is.
Yeah, it was another one of those things where, I thought you were going to stop talking, and then I was going to jump in and be like, I'm here. But you just kept going with the introduction. We're going to get better at it. We're going to get better at it.
Wait, you're saying that was awkward? Do you want?
Yeah.
You
well,
want
I
like
just
a full
I never
introduction. Give me music then.
No, I don't even need a full introduction. I just think that we've done this enough that people sort of know what's about to happen.
I don't even have your bio. I could read your bio if you want.
No, I don't need any of that. I'm the international man of mystery.
That's what you're going with? I'm now that now you're screwed.
You don't know who that is?
Every week now.
Isn't that Austin Powers?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you were hip to that.
In the first hour, we reviewed Boogie Nights, and I wanted to ask you on air before we start with whatever is on your mind this week. Have you seen the movie Boogie Nights?
No, I have not.
Had you ever heard of the movie Boogie Nights?
Possibly. Like I think I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you a single thing that happens in it.
So Coca, can I tell people your age, or is that not appropriate?
Yeah, go for it.
What's your age?
I was about to say there's a good test.
I'm going to say 35.
Yeah, 35.
35.
Yeah.
So we're only 20 years apart. It's not 22 years. It's not that big an age difference. And for you not to have heard of Boogie Nights, which I think is an iconic movie. So when I'm doing my whole thing in the first hour about Roller Girl, you have no vision in your mind. You can't picture one thing. Mm-hmm. Did anyone in the chat know who Roller Girl was?
I didn't know if you were talking to chat there, or if you were talking to me. Yeah, people in the chat knew what it was, but they're some of them are in your age group, so they sort of understand your references. But then there's a bunch of us where we're sitting in the chat like, what is this guy talking about?
Well, all I can say to all of you is you're welcome. All right, what's on your mind, Coca?
Yeah, I want to start with the Mavericks. I feel like that is still a big story because of what happened with Nico Harrison and firing Nico Harrison, and just 9 months after that Luka Doncic trade. And for this, I think you covered everything that needs to be covered when it comes to Nico Harrison and the firing. What I want to talk about is Patrick Dumont and these new owners. And I like to always bring up these new owners because this group of ownership is different than what it was like when you were in baseball. And what I mean by that is these guys feel the pressure from fans way more than I feel past owners did. Because that's the only reason why Nico Harrison was fired, was because Mavericks fans kept showing up to every single game chanting, "Fire Nico." They were shooting free throws. Their own team is shooting free throws, and the entire arena is screaming, "Fire Nico." And at some point, Patrick Dumont must have felt that pressure, especially with the team being they were 3-8 at the time. Now I believe they're 3-9. He felt that pressure, and he needed to do something. And I feel like that's not something that used to happen, where, owners were okay with, it's a GM, right? The guy's being booed, whatever. You see it in baseball with people showing up to the stadium, with John Fisher. John Fisher's not selling the team any quicker because fans are upset with him. But, you get 9 months of this meltdown from Mavericks fans that, Patrick Dumont felt like this was the time he had to make a move. And that to me seems different than what we're used to.
What if I told you that everything that happened with Patrick Dumont has happened to owners for the last 50 years, if not longer? What if I mentioned to you all of the ways that back in the day, Yankee fans wanted the Steinbrenner to fire the GM, Gene Michaels, Stick Michaels, or to fire Billy Martin, which Steinbrenner did and undid so many times.
Well, you see it now with Cashman, right? With Cashman, every Yankee fans have wanted Cashman gone for 5-6 years now, and this Steinbrenner hasn't done a thing.
Right. So I guess when I'm pushing back to you to tell you that we all feel like what we're going through today is different than what happened years ago. We do this with our families. Hey, you don't realize how hard we had to walk uphill twice to school and back with holes in our shoes, and it snowed every day. We all tend to believe that what we're going through is the hardest thing ever. But what you're saying, fans have been pressuring owners and presidents for as long as I can remember, not just for me being in the game, but I'm talking about in my childhood. It was like the back page of the New York Post all the time, the pressure on ownership with the Knicks. The Knicks were horrible. The Yankees were horrible during my childhood. And so I don't view it any differently. I think the biggest difference between today's owner and yesterday's owner is their price of entry. It's the pressure they feel about the level of their investment. It's not, maybe you could argue, and this would be a good debate, maybe it's interesting, is social media changing? Because I didn't deal with any of that. Do you think
if the Mavericks were 10-0, if the Mavericks were 10-0, would Nico Harrison still be the GM?
But no one would be, but if they were 10-0, you'd agree the fans wouldn't be pressuring Dumont. And
no, they were. That's what I'm saying. The fans didn't care. The fans didn't care if they were winning or if they were losing. The fans were going to boo them.
Still at 10-0.
Cooper Flag. They were screaming fire Nico with Cooper Flag shooting free throws. That's the number one pick. That's supposed to be the next face of the franchise. And that's the difference. Is what I'm saying is that Patrick Dumont, he showed up to that game. He's sitting down in the front row with a fan, talking to a fan who's in a Luka Lakers jersey. So, he's not sitting up in a suite somewhere. I just feel like now these guys are being more vocal, and they're being more vocal on social media, whether it's Matt Ishbia with the Suns, who's always tweeting something. He's always getting out there. He's always paying attention to what people are saying, because I guess now there's just more avenues for that information to get to the owner.
Your guy Stevie tweets.
Exactly. And it's always something that in the end, he's going to regret, because he's firing off tweets when things are good. And then when things go bad, he's like, everybody hang in there. Things are going to be okay. In football, you get the Jerry Jones, right? But Jerry's not going to fire himself, and he doesn't have to fire any, the only person he has to fire is the head coach, right? Because he also plays the role of the GM. But, this to me just felt like Mavericks fans were the ones who did this.
Do you think Patrick Dumont was rooting for 3-8 and not for 11-0? Because 3-8 gave him the cover to do the firing that he wanted to do in order to appease the fans who you say at 11-0 are going to be just as angry as they are at 3-8. I don't agree with that. It's a great take to have for you. But if they're 11-0, they're not firing their GM. They're going to wait for a losing streak. We did that many times with managers where, we know we want to fire a manager. We'd love to do it after a loss. Sometimes we had to do it after a win, but the preference would be after a loss. It's like what we talk about with team meetings and making a coaching change or any sort of thing like that. You do it before a game you can win. No one ever makes a managerial change before facing Skenes or Skubal. It just doesn't happen in the history of baseball because you'd have to be an idiot to do that. So maybe Dumont was happy at 3-8, but man, a lot came out on him this week that I don't know if we got to on the show because we didn't have time. Did we talk about the whole training issue that he wanted Anthony Davis back playing?
Well, that just came out yesterday, so you weren't going to get to it, but that came out on Wednesday that he's requested more data into Anthony Davis and his calf injury, and if this is something that can reoccur before he allows Anthony Davis to come back.
Who's he requesting it from? John Denver?
Yeah, that's the thing that confuses me. Is because why wouldn't the training staff be doing this already?
They are.
Right? Like why does he have to request more information about an injury before Anthony Davis is cleared to play? I don't know. I'm puzzled.
Did you just totally blow by my John Denver reference? Because I
I
think
don't.
I just did it to you again. If
Well,
I'd said
here's the thing:
Morgan
is like if people
Freeman,
just don't get the joke, just let it go.
no,
Just
but I'm here.
because
I'm here
now
for
you just
you.
ruined this conversation
No,
about
no,
Anthony
no, I haven't.
Davis.
We're gonna have
No,
this conversation.
this
We're
is the
having it,
side note
Coca.
of all side notes, and it's just like just
Should
let
I
it
have said
go.
Morgan Freeman? Would that have mattered to you? Do you associate Morgan Freeman as God or John Denver? Or neither? Do you know Morgan Freeman as God and Bruce Almighty, or is that too old for you also?
No, I get it. I get it.
Okay.
I'm
John
just
Denver playing God in a movie called Oh God, one of the great movies of the 70s. And it's very funny for an owner to do this. But what do you think our training staff does every day? We get a report every single day of every player who's injured and where they are in their injury, how many days they've missed, what their recovery was today. They threw for 5 minutes from 30 feet. They ran the bases. They hit off a tee. In basketball, they were on the court, no contact, but in sneakers, taking jump shots. They took balls in the post and made moves, but only to the left, not to the right. They took 20 free throws. You get every bit of information. So, Patrick Dumont, is he trying to allege, and this is what interests me about the conversation, is he saying that he doesn't agree with his medical staff because he has a view that is different? Or is he saying that he wants more information from his medical staff so he can decide when Anthony Davis is ready to play?
yeah, I think it's one of those things with Anthony Davis where he's always hurt. And that was the big thing is like, Davis is somebody who is, people would claim is injury prone just because of, he goes down in games, he leaves games, but he always finds his way back. But, he had the eye injury last year when they signed him, or when they traded for him, sorry, and he missed some time and now he's wearing the goggles. Now he goes down with the calf injury. So it always seems like something with Anthony Davis is up. So maybe because of how much he traded for him and because Anthony Davis is supposed to be this new cornerstone of his franchise, that he's like, listen, maybe in years past, they rushed him back. We don't have to fully rush him back this time. We want to protect him, especially from himself. If he's saying, I'm good to go, I feel good to go. Maybe he just wants to buy some additional time for Anthony Davis to, heal up, get a little healthy. We're early in the season right now. I know the team is struggling, but a healthy Anthony Davis makes us, a play-in team eventually, and maybe we can
Whoa,
contend.
that's the goal.
I mean, listen, with basketball, it's the top 10 teams, right? 10 teams make it, so you can whatever, but like, that this is the way the NBA set it up for. The NBA
normally
has
it's the
set
other
up their
way, though,
season
Coca.
for this.
Normally, it's the players who you want the players to come back faster. You want to get them playing as quickly as possible. And there's some players, each player is different. We've had guys who have wanted to come back prematurely and we had to slow them down. And we've had guys who were going so slowly that we just didn't know how to get them going faster because you've got agents who say to players, do not play injured. Because if you don't get good results, you are going to go to the market, whether it's arbitration or free agency, and you're going to have to then tell potential suitors or arbitrators, hey, I know I was playing, but I was actually hurt, and that's why I didn't hit well or pitch well. Agents say, don't do that. You have to feel really good. But they're old school players like Andre Dawson. He played hurt every single day. You couldn't keep him off the field. He'd get frustrated with our young players who were not playing because they had a little bang and a bruise because he was used to playing literally with no knees during the course of a season on the turf in Montreal. So there's a lot going on with when players come back, when they don't. But Anthony Davis, I think he's in the middle of a major long-term maximum contract as far as I can remember, but you could probably look at that. So I don't think that is a factor in him coming back or not. I think the reality is that Patrick Dumont, if he's smart, would trade Anthony Davis as soon as he can because he will be a constant reminder of the Luka trade. And if you want to move on from the Luka trade, the best thing to do is to get rid of anyone you got in the Luka trade so you can literally pretend like it never happened.
More of the new owner conversation, and especially in the NBA, where it seems like players change teams every year, but like major players. So what new owners always do is you call it the new owner-itis, where they always come in and they just want to spend, spend, spend. Well, there's no better case for that than Steve Ballmer and what's happening with the Clippers, where they go out and they bring in Bradley Beal. They signed him to a 2-year, $10 million deal only because the Suns had, the Suns had given him that massive buyout where he still owed, I believe, like $100 million over the next 5 years. And now we're 11 games into the season and Bradley Beal is done for the season. He had a hip fracture. He's getting season-ending surgery. And now the Clippers are back in that place where they tried to just go for big names, and they thought that big names would be what would get them over the hump with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. And now it just feels like, here we go again with Steve Ballmer just wanting to just spend money when he didn't need to spend money. He could have just built a team. I think it was Norman Powell was their sort of replacement, and you see what's happening with him in Miami, where he looks like he is, a legitimate player for Miami, where he could have just been, been with the Clippers. It just seems like, Matt Ishbia is finding out the hard way, right?
You're tough, man.
Is it tough? What about it is I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm telling you, every team in every sport has players who are good on another team that you had. That is not uncommon. So when
but Bradley Beal wasn't good on the Suns. Everybody saw what Bradley Beal was on the Suns.
They only gave him $11 million over 2 years. That is not a major signing for the Clippers at all. That's just like an extra veteran piece where if there's upside and he can do it. Because don't forget,
but that's what you say. That's what you're saying. Steve Ballmer wanted Bradley Beal to be Bradley Beal. He saw the price tag, and that's the only reason why he brought him in at that price tag was because of that buyout from the Suns. But the name Bradley Beal is what got, him to do that, and what maybe Lawrence Frank believed he could be. But with the Suns, he was a failure with the Suns. He wasn't going to be some new player. It wasn't going to be like, you were going to get
why
Bradley
wouldn't you
Beal
take the flyer? And preseason prognosticators, I believe they had the Clippers, and you can check this. Weren't they one of the top 5 in terms of odds to win a title before the season started? Like, I believe they went through the lineup, and Bradley Beal was a part of that lineup. Can you check that? For people watching this on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, please hit subscribe. Yes, that is actually Coca. When he looks to your left or his right, he's looking at one of the myriad monitors he has, and we haven't figured out his setup where his camera is in one place, his monitors are in the other. So he's doing stuff right now, like trying to figure out opening odds of the title, which I don't know if that's still available on DraftKings. But the Clippers
they were plus 1,800.
And what are they now?
Which would be 8th. They had the 8th best odds.
And where are they now? I would assume they're in the 20s? Low 20s?
I mean, I have to go to a different website for that.
Oh, you do? Sorry.
Yeah, they don't have preseason, because you can't bet on preseason odds. Now they're plus 5,000.
Because after 11 games. So while we'd say it's early in the season, the odds would say that the Clippers have not started particularly well. And I would say that Bradley Beal is not really a part of that, because people inside the NBA would say Bradley Beal, that was not an important signing by the Clippers. It was made to be important by the media and by certain analysts, but people inside the game, I don't think viewed him as he's the one who's going to take the Clippers over the top. And owners do this all the time. Steve Ballmer may said, God, I love that name. I love that person. I only have to give him $11 million because he's getting so much money. Let's just do it. What's the worst that'll happen? Well, you're seeing the worst that'll happen is he writes an $11 million check, which basically he takes from below the mattress in the 4th guest room of the 8th house, gives it to Beal, and that's the end of it. That's the complaint that we have about the Dodgers and that other teams have about the Clippers, and why this investigation is so important into salary cap circumvention. Because for Ballmer, $11 million, it didn't matter to him.
Yeah, but I don't think you're understanding the point I'm trying to get across here. And I think you're fighting back against it because you just like to do that with me, is that it doesn't work. It hasn't worked for any of these teams. So I don't understand why.
That's just not true, though. There are veterans who come in. There are veterans who come in and are part of winning teams.
But he is not the guy. He is a name. The Thunder didn't win last year with bringing in some sort of veteran who didn't fit into the mix. They had Alex Caruso. You know, the Celtics won a championship because they brought in Drew Holiday. Like, these are pieces that win championships that can still play. They're not just names for an owner to be like, oh, that's a big name. Let's bring him in. Let's make this big three. Like, they're bringing in people who are helping their team, who are these team players, who are veterans, who are team players. You know, the Celtics had Al Horford for a while. Al Horford was that piece for them. But he's not this huge name that teams should go out there and try and sign. But like Bradley Beal, like that's what I'm talking about when I say these new owners, because the same thing happened with the Suns and Matt Ishbia, where Bradley Beal was, where he felt like he needed to get Kevin Durant. He had Bradley Beal. He had Devin Booker. And what happened with that team? They fizzled out and they did nothing. But these are the new owners who are just overspending on names rather than trying to put together the best team. And we're still seeing it. And, and now Matt Ishbia is struggling because he went out and did that. It didn't work. And now he has to start all over again.
Yeah, I think the world is littered. The leagues are littered with new owners who do that. And we did it, and it worked for us. Because the same criticism you could make when we signed Pudge Rodriguez, a big name who had no reason to think that he was going to be good because he was totally washed up. 1-year deal, $10 million, and you get a ring. So I think there are times when you bring in a name or a player, a veteran player that works, but more often than not, it doesn't. And the better question that I'm pondering is Lawrence Frank actually running the Clippers? Or do we think, are you equating Ballmer and Ishbia? Because my view is that Ishbia was actually making personnel choices for his GM, and he was playing fantasy basketball. Do we believe that that is what Ballmer is doing as well? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that Pablo's ever alleged that. I think he's just alleged that there's salary cap circumvention going on.
Yeah, but I mean, what Pablo is alleging is, points to this being Ballmer, right? Because they're not saying Lawrence Frank was the one who went to Aspiration and got this deal done. They're saying Steve Ballmer was the one who went to Aspiration and got this deal done.
Well, he's the one who could get it done. The question is did he do it because, who wouldn't want Kawhi Leonard? That's not a big enough part of the story. Kawhi Leonard was not a schlepper when he signed with the Clippers. He was coming off his original contract. When he originally got to the Clippers, wasn't he coming off his world championship with the Raptors?
Yeah, but this is what I'm talking about. Is like you're asking if it was Lawrence Frank, but like it's pointing to this being Steve Ballmer, right? It's pointing to Steve Ballmer being the one who's like, I want Kawhi Leonard. We're getting Kawhi Leonard. So I just feel like he has his his fingers all over this. But we'll move on because
who's the owner of the Ravens, Coca? Do you know the owner of the Ravens?
Bisciotti, yeah.
Does he get involved? Like, what's his reputation?
You don't really
Ravens fan.
You don't really hear anything about him.
Who's the GM of the Ravens?
Eric DaCosta.
And so
you hear way more from him than you do the owner.
And so as a fan, I'm making a point here. Do you like the way that operates, where you hear not from the owner but you hear from the GM? Does that matter to you as a fan at all?
Yeah, I think when you're winning, I feel like when you're winning, you're okay with hearing from the GM because the moves that are being made or whatever, like you're in a position where you don't have to question, right? You're not questioning the GM. You're not questioning, is the owner paying attention to what's happening? Where do we have a terrible product on the field? Something needs to be done. But like, with the team like the Ravens, where you've been sort of successful, over the past 20 years, you give some grace to the owner because the GM seems to be working out.
And so in Miami, where Stephen Ross also doesn't talk to the media, barely ever. And so he's not involved. And the question is, it's never been necessarily alleged that he's making the football decisions, but they've been a failure of a team. The anger that you'd have as a Dolphins fan is the fact that, again, they're not winning. So would you agree that all of the angst that fans have about owners, about GMs, it's just about winning? And that's it? That winning would cover every upset that any fan would have about anyone on their team?
Yeah, but isn't that the point? Like, isn't that the
Boy,
point of
that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's the point of sports, though. So, like, why would you, what's the reason to be furious with an owner or a GM if your team is winning? What is, I don't understand
But
the
what
point to
counts
that.
as winning? Do the Yankees count to you as a winning team?
Uh, for me, I would say that the Yankees are, um, would be a winning team. Yeah, for sure. Like,
I
I don't
couldn't agree
understand.
more.
I don't understand, why Yankees fans, as opposed to like you always, come to the defense of the Pirates, and you just had previously done it. I believe
Mhm.
in Wednesday's show when we talked about bad owners. And you did it when we talked about Paul Skenes, where it's just like, why should any Pirates fan give any sort of grace to Bob Nutting? They shouldn't give him anything. Why? Because they hit on some draft picks? Like, that's it? That's the reason? Well,
That's a
when the
big
dot
one, but
yeah,
anyway.
sure, but you can say that, but they haven't won anything. They haven't won anything, and when the Dodgers are spending $260 million more, and you're this team who's in the gutter, and you're like, "Oh, but we have Paul Skenes, and Paul Skenes is winning." Okay, so that's what I'm supposed to root for? I'm supposed to root for just Paul Skenes to be successful? No, I want to see my team make it to the playoffs. I want to see my team compete for something, but the Pirates aren't getting any of that. So I just wouldn't give them that same sort of grace, and that's why with Yankees fans, you're at the point where you're like spoiled, where you're spoiled with success. You're spoiled with these winning seasons, but you don't. They're not finishing it off and getting that ring. But to me, if I was a Pirates fan or a Rockies fan, you have every reason to be furious with ownership. Every reason to be furious.
So I will ask you to think about this and then we can move on. Do you get furious with the Astros and Cubs when they're going through the rebuild and losing 100 games 3 straight years? Is that part of a plan where you accept the losing because it's on the path to winning? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But during the course of that losing, you give them the benefit of the doubt because they've announced a plan, they've done a rebuild, and so that's a grace that you're willing to give as a fan.
Well, they're showing signs, right? Like the Astros and the Cubs were showing signs of, this isn't something that is going to last forever, right? When you look at a team like the Royals, where they had that small pocket of success and it led to a World Series, like
Mhm.
you saw it there, and you saw them sort of like, would this team be able to recapture it moving forward? Probably not. But they had a window of real success. Now you want to see that, right? You want to see that, that hey, we've done this before, we can do it again. The
They're on to the
Cardinals.
next window.
Yeah, but Cardinals fans, like, that's one where it's just like the team right now, you went through all that success, but they're not showing what the Astros or the Cubs did, right? They're not showing their fans like, "Hey, we have this plan, we've built this plan, we've got these players in place, we're going to be able to do something." So that's why I think all of that is different than what the Pirates are doing, or what the Rockies are doing, or what the White Sox are doing, where it looks like these teams are just losing, and there is no real plan for their future, whether it be immediate or long term.
But the Cardinals never went through a rebuild like the Astros and the Cubs.
Yeah, they're just losing.
So you say that, but they were pretty much competitive this season for 4 of the 6 months, like the first 4 months, and they finished around 500. Uh, that's a great example, actually. Teams don't want to be in the middle, and the biggest problem the Cardinals have is they're not rebuilding and they're not in their winning cycle. And so that was the biggest issue I had as team president, is living in the middle so many years. And it's so stupid. It's better to be really bad and then try for your windows of being really good. The Royals are in a new window already. It's only been 10 years, only, since they won the World Series. I believe they won it in 2015. So it's literally 10 years. And now they've got one of the premier players in all of baseball, in Bobby Witt, obviously.
Hmm.
So all teams do is this. They win, they lose, they win, they lose. We try to make the winning windows last longer and the losing windows as short as possible. The biggest labor issue is the jealousy that the teams have for other teams who don't have to do this. The Yankees, the Dodgers are examples where they can be competitive every year, but there's 27 teams that just can't be. So I don't, the Pittsburgh Pirates, I'd have to go back. I think they were in the playoffs 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row in the teens, the 2000 teens, I would say is my guess. They played in the wild card. I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, 13, 14, 15.
So they had 3 years in a row. It's 10 years ago only.
Yeah, but that's what you don't get, and I think it's because you've lost that fandom, and we've talked about this before, is that 10 years, that's a decade. That's a huge amount of time if you are a sports fan. That's a giant chunk of your life being devoted to a baseball team. We're talking about, 1,600 baseball games that you've had to watch of your team not being competitive enough to make it back to the playoffs.
I lived at Coca my whole childhood. I had no good teams. And I lived in New York where I had a million possibilities.
You saw the Knicks go to the NBA Finals.
In 1994, during Jordan's retirement. By the way, I was 26 years old.
Okay.
My childhood. So does that count as my childhood?
But I'm saying if you were still some sort of diehard Knicks fan and you hadn't seen the Knicks back to the championship in 30 years, and you've gone through these losing seasons, and you've gone through times where you feel like, nobody's trying, like, you would then understand where we come from as fans, where it's just like the Pirates don't look like they're going to be any sort of contender for the next decade.
Well,
right?
How do you know that?
And I'm saying looks like. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? When you're a fan, you look at the farm, you look at the farm team, you look at the spending, you look at who's on the team now. That's all you can do is sort of project. But it doesn't look like you're going to try and tell me that the Pirates right now look like contenders against the Dodgers.
I'm going to tell you in a 7-game series, if I had Paul Skenes pitching 3 times, that I like my odds against anybody.
Yeah, they have to get there. They have to get to the play. They have to get to it. And that's why, we can get to the GM meetings and what's happening with the GM meetings, because one of the things that, really caught my eye was this conversation around Byron Buxton and the Twins, where just in July, Byron Buxton said, I'm never going to waive my no trade clause. I'm going to be a twin.
Never.
I'm going to be a Twin for life. And then he sees what happens with this team, where it's just like, they're trading away pieces. They're sort of gutting the team to do their sort of rebuild. But Byron Buxton is a great example of a player who should be like, hey, trade me. Trade me. I want to go win somewhere else, because, that's a piece that the Twins can trade and turn into something. Because if the Twins hold on to him for too long, they might not get anything out of that. So wait,
are you suggesting, hold on, are you liking that Buxton negotiated a no trade clause and his family likes Minnesota? I'm making up that his family likes Minnesota. They may or may not. They may live there. They may not. But are you bemoaning the fact that he's exercising the rights that he negotiated for with that no trade clause? Or are you blaming the Twins for giving him the no trade clause?
No, I'm blaming him for coming out publicly saying, I'm never going to waive my no trade clause. I'm a Twin for life. And then 3 months later, the story is, hey, Byron Buxton is going to be open to leaving Minnesota.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's breaking news to me.
No, well, to you, yeah, but that's the news out of the winter meetings, is that Byron Buxton now could be open to leaving Minnesota.
That's funny. I didn't know that. Now I'm laughing because that's why I just mouthed to you, never say never. Like when a player does that, you ignore that as a front office. It's so stupid that, you know what they did to Stanton in Miami? He had a no trade clause. And they had him traded to St. Louis and to San Francisco. And he said no to both. And eventually he got traded to the Yankees. But in that interim period, the thing that was said to him was, all right, and I wasn't there anymore, but no problem. If you don't want to be traded, you're going to be surrounded by all people making the minimum, and that's going to be the team, and we're going to lose a hundo. Are you in or are you out? And before you know it, he's a Yankee, and the rest is history. But players have a funny thing about them with these no trade clauses. They really are used way more as a sword than a shield. And when a player comes out like Buxton did in July and said, I'm never going to be traded. There was a player, Garrett Crochet. Is he the one who said, don't trade me to a team that's going to use me in the bullpen if you don't sign me to a long-term deal?
Yeah.
Was he the guy who did that? All of a sudden, you get the long-term deal, which you got in Boston, and now bullpen starting, hey, I'm here for you. I love you, Boston. It's all just funny to me. It's about guaranteed money. Buxton has the money, and he may say, you know what, I've had it with Minnesota, but he also could go Mike Trout and say, we stink, we've never won a playoff game, but I don't want to leave Southern California. So
yeah, we just saw it with last year, and now we're seeing it again with Nolan Arenado, where Nolan Arenado, is on the Cardinals. The Cardinals, we just talked about them. You saw on paper that they weren't going to be any sort of contender. Nolan Arenado was a guy, I believe, who has a no trade clause, and he could have been the Yankees starting third baseman, and it would have helped the Yankees out tremendously to have a bat and to have a glove in there like Arenado, because they really struggled at third base. They traded at the deadline for McMahon, but he wasn't somebody who was going to bring a real bat to the plate, and they knew that.
Good glove, though.
Yeah, but they knew his defense was incredible. But Arenado's another guy where,
Better.
last year, the whole entire offseason last year is Arenado's going to be traded. Arenado's going to be traded. And then it comes out Arenado doesn't want to be traded. He's not going to waive his no trade clause. And now we're repeating that cycle again with him, where it's just like, but now you're another year older, right? You're another year past whatever your prime could be. So you just see it again. And
so are you upset that Arenado did not get traded because he didn't want to? Or are you upset with the Cardinals for wasting Arenado's prime, which they did? They were really good with Arenado and Goldschmidt, by the way.
Well, I think this is where, you can see some of the sense that I have, where I'm not just always blaming the team for, the downfall of the team, where there can be some blame on Arenado, right? Because if he wants, if he didn't want to retire a Cardinal, right? He didn't come out and say, I'm going to retire a Cardinal, because you can see with Mike Trout, right? Mike Trout, it doesn't feel like is ever going to leave the Angels, because he had a chance to leave the Angels. He didn't leave the Angels. It just feels like he's destined to just always be with the Angels. If you're Arenado, and you wanted to win again, and you didn't have any real ties to St. Louis, I don't understand why you don't waive that no trade clause last year and just get it over with and try and maximize your winning window. And now a year later, you're like, hey, here we go again. Am I going to be the prize of the offseason, when last offseason you were the prize? You were that guy. And then, the Cardinals go out there. You have fans not showing up anymore. This was what we talked about it, their worst attended home game season, in like a decade. So it's just, it doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, so Arenado happens to be one of the great guys in baseball, and so he's old enough, and I've been was around him a lot. He and Stanton actually have the same agent, and he is an interesting player and an interesting guy, potentially a Hall of Fame player. That good, one of the best third basemen I ever saw, actually, and obviously his bat. And there's just a lot of things that go into a player's mindset. Playing in St. Louis, it's one of those places. I was always surprised with players who didn't ever want to go to St. Louis. It's such a great place to play. Now, it's not a coast. There's not the nightlife that players would prefer to have for 81 nights a year. But that said, it's in front of the best fans. I've always thought Cardinal fans were the best in all of baseball. And so for me, Arenado may be happy. He may be happy with where his career is. He may not have an interest in picking up and moving for whatever reason. He's made all the money that he needs. He's got his family with wherever they are, whatever they're doing. It's hard to ever know. But when I was in it, I would talk to the player. I wouldn't do it through the media, or I wouldn't guess. I would literally sit with the player and say, "Hey, what's going on here? Where's your head?" Because for whatever reason, you're taught in president school and in GM school that you should not take into account anything with the players. Don't talk to them. Use them as chattel, as pieces on a board. That's certainly what the analytics people do. But I had a different way of operating. I always liked to hear what the players were saying. It doesn't mean I would ever be able to do exactly what they were saying, or I could every time, but I was interested. So I wouldn't be able to tell you about Arenado because I have not spoken to him directly about what his view is of St. Louis, and he hasn't said it. Trout has been very public about LA. It's like, man, my kids love it here. My wife, we have a whole family. We love it here. I love to win with the Angels, but you know what? I've got a life to live. And I got to tell you, over the last 2 months, I got a little different perspective on that concept, on the possibility of choosing family or choosing that sort of off the field happiness, choices that I never had made ever in my life. I always chose work. And so I don't know that I'd be willing to blame a player anymore.
Yeah, because another player who sort of falls into that category is Myles Garrett and what happened with him in the Browns, right? Where he came out, he had this whole letter, I'm leaving here, I want to be traded. Then they give him this long-term deal. Nothing goes right this season. The Browns still look exactly like the Browns. And now you have all these people saying, oh, Myles Garrett needs to be traded. He needs to leave. No, he chose where he wanted to be. He wanted that money, right? He wanted that long-term deal. He got the money that he was asking for. That's it. Like,
is
that's
he complaining now, Coca? Is he asking out, or are you talking about fans?
No, I'm talking more about like how vocal fans were about, like, get Myles Garrett out of there, trade him. He needs to go to a win. He had the chance, right? He didn't need to sign.
Is he misbehaving?
No, I think he's the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year again. I think he has like 11 sacks. He's been as good as he's always been, but the team just stinks. So what are you going to do?
If you're Myles Garrett, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying here as we end up the week here. Are you saying that Myles Garrett should be asking to be traded to a better team?
No, I'm saying it's the same. I'm saying it's the same thing with Mike Trout, where, like, Mike Trout had the opportunity to leave the Angels. Mike Trout didn't need to sign that long-term deal. Mike Trout any day could walk in and say, "Hey, I want to get out of here. I want to leave here. Trade me away." Myles Garrett had that opportunity. He asked for the trade. He said he was never going to play for the Browns again. And this just happened last year. So over the course of the year, Myles Garrett got exactly what he wanted. And what he wanted in the end was he wanted to get that long-term deal. He wanted to get that, that huge contract, and he got it. So it's just like, I'm supposed to feel bad now that he picked the Browns. He picked them. He wanted that deal. So I just don't. I don't feel bad for a player.
What a great look! That never happens. You're always on the pro player side.
No, I'm not, and that's what I just talked about. See, that's how I know. Just like I don't listen to your jokes, you don't listen to me talking, because I just got at Nolan Arenado and Byron Buxton for not waiving their no trade clauses.
Well, but that's not being anti-player. That's questioning. No, well, Buxton, by the way, now is saying he will waive his no trade clause. So that's Buxton is doing differently than what Garrett's doing.
3 months after he said he would never waive it.
I wonder whether he was lied to. Do you think that, because the Twins, remember, that's a good case. They were going to be sold. Yeah. It was going to be new owners. And then all of a sudden, remember when the Pohlad stood up and said, we looked around and it turns out we're the best owners for this franchise.
Well, that happened only, a month after Rob Manfred came out and said, no, the sale is moving along. We're going to get we're going to get some information pretty soon. That'll happen. All right. The last thing I want to talk about, because I brought it up before and it's still confusing me now, is the NBA All-Star Game. And it's been the biggest problem when it comes to any sort of All-Star game. The NBA has tried so much to capture something, because there's been no defense. You've had players complaining. You had players go out there and say, hey, we're not going to try. And now they finally came up with a concept that might work. And it's USA versus the world. And then we see the rules that come out, and I'm confused all over again at what they're trying to do, because it seems so simple, right? Have two teams, have the USA, have the world, have them play against each other. And now we're finding out, hey, we're actually going to have two USA teams, and it's going to be made up of all-stars from the East and the West, and then there's going to be an all-star team of the world, and if there's not enough players in the top 16 vote getters, then they're going to bring in some other world players, and then we're going to have round robins, and they're going to be shortened games, and it's just like, why are we making basketball,
They're
which seems
trying.
to be just have two teams. It's the most simple thing you can do. Have a world team, a USA team, and have them play each other. That's it.
But what if there aren't enough spots on the U.S. roster for all the people who should be U.S. All-Stars? The union wouldn't permit that. The union is a part of this, and they've got to make sure that the All-Stars are not being done according to race, religion, or creed. They're being done according to the way All-Stars have been voted in, according to the rules of the CBA.
But now they have a world team, and I just told you, if there's not enough world players, then they're just going to select world players to go in there. It's the same exact thing with the USA, because now they're doing it positionless. Now there's no more only a center makes it.
I think there's twice as many USA players as world players.
Because there's gonna be two. There's gonna be two USA teams. But now if the round robin works out, you're just gonna get USA versus USA, and that's what people are supposed to. People are supposed to pay attention to that. I just think you could have had a USA. But the Pro Bowl made the correct choice, and the Pro Bowl moved their game to Super Bowl weekend. And now during the Super Bowl, you're going to have the flag football tournament. You're going to have more players there. You're going to have more players interacting with fans. So Super Bowl weekend becomes this huge weekend for fans outside of just the game and outside of just the media day. Now you're going to have even more players there to interact. So that makes sense. It made sense to do that. It makes sense to, keep the eyeballs there. But for me, it's set up so perfectly to just do a world versus USA. Have two teams, have them play each other. You can throw in some money, bragging rights, whatever. But now I'm just confused.
All-Star games are tough, Coca. They're tough because the broadcasters really want it. Part of the media deals that the NBA did, and this is year one of them, the All-Star game was a jewel event. It is what broadcasters want. It's after the Super Bowl. It's in February. It's the sort of the before baseball. And so that has been something that you can sell. So the NBA was never going to get rid of the All-Star game. It's like saying MLB will get rid of their All-Star game in order to have the World Baseball Classic during the midsummer, or maybe the Olympics one year they won't do the All-Star game. But the MLB will only do that if they get replacement money in their broadcast deals to replace the All-Star game, which is always a big driver. And so you've got the broadcasters saying, hey, just give us something. And so what Adam Silver said is, we can keep trying every year. And he actually came out and said it. We're going to keep tweaking, keep seeing what works and what can draw the interest of the players. The players like the Emirates Cup, but they tweaked it, the midseason cup. I think it's no longer, is it this year, Coca, that the finals and semis are not in Vegas? The semis are in the home arena, but the finals are still in Vegas. I think that's the rule this year.
I don't fully remember.
But everything, the point is, when something's new, you evolve it over time. The rules change over time. Adam Silver, and I don't want to carry his water, as you know we don't on this show, he's trying. And this is something different. We had to wait to see that this would be what they would do with USA versus World.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Work?
It's not.
We don't know.
Yeah, but it's not. It's like USA versus World.
It's
but then
USA.
it could just become USA versus USA. So like, is that a wait to see
the world's
win for
way
you?
Better.
But I'm saying,
Haven't
is that
they
a
won
wait?
Like every MVP?
But would that be a wait to see win for you if it ends up being USA versus USA in the finals of the All-Star game? Because then it's not USA versus World, it's USA versus USA.
I already took the win on DavidSamsonPodcast.com. That wait to see is over. It is fully baked. The NBA All-Star game is USA versus the world. The fact that there are mechanics in there that could make it a USA versus USA at the end of the round robin, not relevant. Thank you, Coca. As always, you really bring out the... It's just business, Mr. Producer. Have a safe weekend. We'll be back Monday. This is nothing personal.